Good morning, another very warm welcome to Full Scottish, brought to you by Broadcasting Scotland. I'm Suzann McLaughlin, and today Richard Walker and I are joined by Gerry Hassan, political commentator, political thinker, ideas man, and Jean Cameron, the very esteemed outgoing director of Paisley 2021, who's now the national coordinator for Scotland for Processions 2018. We're going to be joined by Charly Houston with some music and entertainment, and without further ado, on with the show.
Hi, good morning. Welcome to the show again. We're going to start, as is now traditional, with our guests and ourselves talking about our stories of the week. So, Jean, what was your story of this past week?
Well, I've been really intrigued about the role that culture has played in the First Minister's visit to China. I think it was very interesting watching the range of topics that the First Minister covered, everything from children's rights and care experience, young people in China, but also the Muriel Spark 100 edition, you know, our Scottish authors being translated for a Chinese audience. Fantastic fantastic links between the Edinburgh Festival and arts festivals out there. And I think people talk about, you know, culture and cultural diplomacy as a nice thing to have, but actually it's essential because it opens doors and creates platforms. It is soft power. But it's been wonderful to see Louise Welsh and the Scottish Ballet Crafts Scotland out there as part of, I think, quite a really beautifully crafted international visit, but also an international visit that's had, I guess, questions in the media here in terms of the timing of announcements about the Cockenzie, the planning application, and Confucius Institute getting money, and who exactly is that? So it's been interesting to see how these things have been together.
Also, as you're very well aware with Paisley 2021, without going too far back, Jean, is that culture and arts literally can lift people out of the impoverished and the feelings of helplessness and being on the edge of society, as it were. Culture is often a way out of that.
Yeah, it is, and I think it also is a great door opener for politicians to occupy a shared space, you know, in terms of the backdrop of things like the Scotland Is Now events, where we've seen the Tourism Minister for Culture meeting with the First Minister over there. And also it can be a kind of contentious space as well. Chinese artists like Ai Weiwei, you know, authors in China that have their voices silenced. Yeah. Actually, because of being provocative and occupying this public space. So it's you know, it's sometimes seen as soft diplomatically, but I think it's really essential and powerful. Yeah.
Because Nicola Sturgeon did talk in the Chinese leadership about human rights. Clearly that's a big issue whenever anybody goes to China. It's a balance. I mean, do you think human rights concerns, are they strong enough for us to say, right, we're just not going to have anything to do with countries like that?
No, obviously not. And I mean, obviously, you know, there's a balance here. The UK's track record on this as a state is deplorable and shocking.
It would be slightly hypocritical.
Yeah, so we only need to mention Saudi Arabia and the you know, the atrocities that are going on in Yemen, aided by British arms and British expertise. But there's just a cognizance here, but as a small country in the world, the balance we have about how we do things ethically, and I think that is Jean says rightly. You know, Scotland has an element of soft power. We have a whole host of wonderful things there. We have the gift of the English language, but Chinese kind of crony capitalism and its web over the world is as problematic, or not more problematic than the Anglo-American capitalism that we in the UK and even Scotland part created.
Yeah, it's going to be the dominant culture, dominant force in 21st century China. So that's, I guess, you have to be in there. You have to have some conversation with them. But there are clearly issues around about the human right, particularly human rights, and the way they sort of, do things there. Shall we say?
Like he who doesn't live in a glass house throw the stones.
Indeed. So, Gerry, your name, Gerry.
Your story.
Sorry, your story.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to have a different tack here and come back home and talk about something now and the past. Scottish education, you know, proud part of all our lives and our traditions. But there's another story of rumbling for a few weeks, really amplified by Ian Jack, great writer, powerful, emotional, insightful writer, wrote a very interesting piece in The Guardian, where he said, I was belted, didn't do me any harm. really, really interesting piece. And what came from that as well was this avalanche of Scots, 2,000 people in 24 hours in The Guardian wrote about it. Nearly all of them, not all, predominantly said, I was belted, it did me harm, or it demeaned other people. So I then wrote a piece about this, reflecting on that, and I got belted like most my friends, and for things I still, and now I think about kind of bizarre injustices, you know, like getting 3 spelling words wrong in a day. In my primary school, you were automatically belted.
Quite right.
And lots of girls were belted, and so I wrote about that. And again, the avalanche of comments I've had on Facebook and Twitter has been something that's actually affected me. And one person, there's some people in denial about this, and one man I saw being in denial, it was actually taken onto Bella Caledonia's Facebook page, this, and someone beautiful and insightful said to him on Facebook, you're clearly in pain, there's other issues going on, and he just opened up and said, yes, my dad was, you know, terrible, etc. My parents regarded education as, you know, bettering yourself as wrong, as not being a man, and I just thought there's something going on here about, because some people say, why are people talking about something that stopped in the state system in 1987? Well, you know, most boys were belted. We've got academic research on that. It looks like people were more belted and punished than in other comparative countries, and we haven't really talked about it, and academic research hasn't gone into it, and the sort of professional educational research doesn't go into it. So there's something coming out here that I think needs to come out.
I think there's correlations. I also seen rumblings of that, Gerry, and I had correlations of, I felt that the people who were saying it did me no harm, and you know, and people that still to the day, I noticed the twisting of language. I've got people I know, acquaintances in the day, oh, if my children are in danger, I'll give them a tap. Now, as if a tap is changing the word away from a slap or a smack or a belt or whatever. And like, I was smacked as a child. Belted in school, it ended just as I went to school. But I think when we find here people, it's very, very common for victims, and I don't use that lightly, people who are experiencing domestic abuse don't initially talk about it, speak about it. Some never speak about it. It's people who are a slave to drug addiction or alcohol addiction. It's, oh no, I just like a drink at the week. People don't want to see themselves as victims. I think sometimes the strongest voice shouting, it never did me any harm, are the people who are actually maybe in the most pain. Totally. So, and I think it's got correlations as well of this, in this West of Scotland toxic masculinity that we talked about sectarianism last week. I think it's the same thing, of the beating of people with a lack of power beat their children and beat their wives. Men who were low paid, low wage, low stature in society went home and beat their children. Teachers who were not very well thought of in the society, or were sort of teaching at that point was one of the ways that a woman could lift herself out of and have a career. Yeah. And then they belted. It's a real West of Scotland problem, and I think they all tie up.
Totally.
Were you belted, Jane?
Yeah, but I think Suzann's right in terms of it wasn't just men. I was belted twice, and I went to
by women.
I went to London School also, and it was by nuns.
Yeah.
Who beat me.
Well, I had the belt twice, and it was for daft things like being messy with my daughters, and it was
just
once
twice.
Just twice.
Jeez,
pure soup. Once by a woman and once by a man, but I think so.
Yeah.
But the fact you can remember it, you know, it's only a few years ago, Jane. Clearly, you and I were belted, but you know, but the fact I remember it very, very clearly, all the occasions, and it was 3 occasions in school I was belted, and twice by women, once by a man. But I remember every moment of it very, very, very clearly, and clearly the physical pain wasn't that. It was the degradation. It was the. I mean, it was sore, but it's the humiliation.
It's also done in front of other people. When you start to think of the basic, it's done publicly. You're humiliated in front of other people, and your friends, etc. They are humiliated in the process. Well, it's only just because I've been thinking about this, but I remember thinking about how wrong it felt at the time, age whatever I was, 10. We did 10 spelling words a day. I got 27 days in a row. I got 10 words right. I got them all right. That's
clearly an issue.
Yeah, that was never acknowledged, right? So and then the moment I get the 3 words wrong, I'm in the queue getting belted, and I remember thinking at the time, this is the injustice. You never even acknowledge excellence. The moment you make a mistake, you're targeted and punished. And I've never said anything at the time. And of course, I'm thinking about it now and thinking, what still feels wrong.
There was a thread on Reddit, and I think teachers would be the first to admit that as well. There was a thread on Reddit quite recently. I poke into this sometimes. It can be interesting. It's a human condition, but and even on Twitter, if you have a wee look, sometimes when someone asked on Twitter, what's your greatest injustice in your life? You know, what angers you the most, like from a child growing up? And almost always it's something to do at school, like,
Really?
you know, not winning a spelling competition because the teacher got the word wrong, you know, and it burning in your life, like, that was my, you can see it deeply scarred me, and it was, she got it wrong, and knowing that I couldn't say because I would be then in trouble for talking back, and all these people, and it all comes from this, from school, and the injustice and unfairness of power.
I'm going to say a word just in support of some teachers, because actually, honestly...
Teachers are the good guys.
No, I'm not. They are, and some aren't. Of course. At my school, some of our teachers got a really hard time, and we had competitions in our class to see how many of the belt we could get per lesson.
Oh yeah, we had that as well. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
So, honestly, it wasn't humiliating because everybody was traipsing up. I mean, you were getting, and some of them at that stage, and that for those teachers, what you got, the belt was not sore.
You're also not being educated in a sense. There's something getting missed here, isn't there?
Yeah.
About a lot of things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was a difficult situation for the teachers.
I should just also say, forget Carol Craig, who started this debate. She began it by talking about being belted and kind of humiliation in school. So she started the Ian Jack thing. There's a very interesting Scottish debate around what's called adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, which there's lots of people interested in now. And Scotland's kind of leading the world in this.
Suzann.
Suzann, you go.
I'll go first. Right, my story of the week was the BBC's decision to broadcast again Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech. Personally, I found that challenging. I didn't really understand the point of it because I thought it was a very divisive and dangerous speech at the time. I understand why you might want to look back on that and you might want to discuss some of it, but I'm not quite sure what was gained by broadcasting the whole thing. But
Nothing.
You think
I
nothing?
listened to it. So I got home last night and caught the last 3 sections on Radio 4, and like yourself, in advance, I was really angry about, well, why is this happening? But you know what? It was very powerful to actually sit with with those words, and the way that it was handled, it was broken up. You know, like section by section, there was the discussion, and we were reminded that at the time when that speech was live in Wolverhampton, nobody left the room. And it's kind of interesting to see what happened to him quite soon afterwards in terms of the Race Relation Act, and again stepping down from being forced out of office. I sat with it more fascinated and repulsed at the same minute. I took it, you know, the words were read by a Scottish actor, Ian McDermott, I want to say, I'm not sure if that's quite right, who I remember being interviewed last year when he did the show, which was at the Lyceum about Powell. And I guess I experienced it as a performance partly.
Right, okay.
It helped me knowing it was that actor rather than if it had been
recorded.
Just recording the actual speech. What did you think? With the principle of it?
I think it's fascinating in that this is a whether we like it or not, this is a seminal speech in post-war British politics that had all sorts of consequences. I think in a way, I'm sympathetic to the argument. I'm a kind of sympathetic to not no platforming in a sense, which is what one argues for not doing this. As Jean says, it was kind of really well sort of staged and explored. This is about contested versions of history, and Powell is both some way. We're living in a Britain in one way created by Powell in terms of Brexit, obsessions on sovereignty, but on racism and the Britain we have become in terms of multiculturalism, he got it completely wrong. And that's what should be explored. Enoch Powell was nearly 100% wrong on this. He predicted like direness and the death of civilization. We're not that society.
No, we are not, absolutely. Suzann, your story.
Mine is also a wee bit about the rewriting of history or history going wrong, and a really interesting story in The Guardian by a writer and playwright Henrietta Norton, who was Mo Mowlam's stepdaughter, saying why was Mo whitewashed out of the talks of the Good Friday Agreement, completely gone as if she didn't exist. Tony Blair didn't mention her. One of the big Irish newspapers had a front page with all the men, including Tony Blair and Gerry Adams and Mark McGuinness and Ian Paisley, and all 6 men on the front. And Mo, who at the time was rightly recognised as a key pin in making the Good Friday Agreement happen. Is it simple sexism? Is there something else underneath? Why was Mo written out? And Henrietta didn't have any answers. She was just rightly angry as to why Mo was whitewashed.
Did it strike you when you listened to Tony Blair's speech that it seemed a bit that she was just missing completely from the whole thing?
To be honest, I didn't catch that.
Right.
But what I really enjoyed was I think it was Radio 4 probably with the archive programme, which it shared, it was commentary from Mo Molan from the time, and all that where she knew she was dying in terms of a brain tumour, but moments of going into that chamber and kind of taking her, because of the heat building up, and taking her wig off and kind of it causing consternation amongst the people there. And she talked about it was lovely hearing her recorded, and just it's so personable, talking about in the middle of the night she'd be leaving the rooms and going, there was kind of security guards outside, and they stood up every time she was there, and she would have a wee kind of back and forth with them and that human connection. So actually my experience of going back over Good Friday has been through women actually, through Monica McWilliams and through Mo Molan. I didn't engage with the Tony Blair.
Did you?
Yeah, I thought that. I mean, Mo Molan's central to the Good Friday Agreement and the peace process. I think there's a couple of things going on as well that are really, really problematic. One is the selective memories of New Labour and people like Tony Blair, God forbid. But then there's also, in a way, I mean, Suzann you mentioned it earlier about something else. There's a kind of toxic masculinity that was clearly at work in New Labour amongst Blair, people like Alistair Campbell, even Gordon Brown. And they were, for all the fact, dread words, of course, Blair's babes, and all that, although, there was much more increased women's representation, there was a problem about women and doing politics that understood and remembered women right at the heart of New Labour. This is about men behaving badly.
Yeah, as if it was.
Indeed. So, we move on to yourself, Jean, and talk a little bit about Paisley 2021. We've talked a bit about culture and how it can change things. So Paisley 2021 was a very brave bid to kind of reinvigorate the economy of Paisley and also to give it some hope for the future.
And spearheaded by women, thank goodness.
Yay.
It was.
With some good honourary buddies, like
Yeah.
Richard, part of our team, thank goodness.
I played a small role in the team.
Oh, very key role.
But it didn't win, although Paisley is going to go on now to do other things. It must have been disappointing to find out that Coventry had won, although Coventry clearly had a good bid as well. But clearly Paisley is now looking to the future with a new renewed confidence. Is that fair to say, because of the bid?
I think so, absolutely. And I'm very aware I'm sitting opposite a Dundonian here, and we were, Dundee were pipped to the post by Hull in the 2017 competition for UK City of Culture. And I really looked at Dundee as a guiding star, actually, in terms of losing out and being crowned City of Culture doesn't mean you don't have a really successful bidding period and have a sense of transformation and ambition. So, we kind of really looked to Dundee and their positivity and everything that grown from that. And yeah, I think you're absolutely, it's so true that Paisley is telling a new story about itself to the world as a result of remembering its authenticity and what it stands for, and the talent that is and around Paisley's scene. So it stepped into that spotlight very comfortably, tells a new story about itself to the world, and people have different expectations of Paisley moving forward, and real investment, as well as the social benefits and the kind of civic pride. There's been massive investment from Renfrewshire Council, both in terms of capital infrastructure and the council approving a legacy plan from the bid. And of course the Paisley 2021 Stadium yesterday, I'm really proud of this, is where St Mirren were crowned champions of the league, and will move into the next division. And I think the football team in itself is a great example of how we do things in Paisley. 29% fan ownership. It's a family club. It won the ground won the family friendly stadium of Scotland earlier this year, and you can see my old house from it, which also makes me very emotional. And they were great champions for the bid, as you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what I found about Paisley? Something my lifelong, one of my proudest things, and something I talk about. Anyone who's never met me, and within the first 5 minutes of meeting me, they'll find out two things about me: that I'm a feminist and a trade unionist. So a proud and long lifetime of trade unionism, and I hadn't realised that in effect trade unionism to a certain degree born in Paisley, and finding out about Smash Art, and it was stuff I didn't know, and I felt like proud and angry at the same time. There's this town just minutes from where I was brought up, really, you know, the other side of the water, and that I didn't know this about it. Again, whitewashing of history and other places that have been pushed forward, so I was delighted to see that, and looking onwards as well. Look, Dundee's gone from strength to strength, you know, with what's happening there, so I fully expect Paisley to rise.
Yeah.
You're a big football fan, Gerry, as well.
I am. Well,
Cameron does football differently, is that?
I don't know about that. I'm a Dundee United fan, and they're obviously a club in crisis and have been for the last 3 years. I just like to say, I think St Mirren are a great force at the moment in Scottish football, and fantastic and deserved champions. They've got a great young team, great setup there, great young manager that I hope they keep as well. So they were going to win that title. Brilliant yesterday. I was also at the Scottish Junior Cup semi-finals yesterday. Auchinleck Talbot versus Lochee United. It's one of the oldest football trophy. I think it's the 5th or 6th oldest football trophy in the world, and it's just a whole hidden world of Scottish society, junior football. These wee, often ex-mining towns like Auchinleck, Cumnock, in Fifeshire, and some of the Lothians, and they've just voted to incorporate themselves, or begun the process of incorporating themselves into the big boys, to use that word, of Scottish football, which is actually hugely controversial because they've been this separate system for 150 years.
Can I say something about the girls of football?
Yes, please do. Toxic masculinity.
So on Tuesday night, when Gerry's team was tanning my team up in Tannadice, back in Paisley, in the Paisley 2021 stadium, I think let's celebrate the fact that Scotland's women team beat Poland. It was a must-win match because we'd been beaten and we hadn't won. I think we maybe drew with Switzerland the week before.
Right.
But there's just such a great...
1-3-0, of course, Scottish women.
Aye, on Tuesday.
Magnificent.
Yeah. Which was great. They had to win that, and you know that there's a real, there is a real movement in terms of women's football. You know, a few years ago, in terms of Glasgow City, we're one of the most successful teams in Scotland at a European level, and St Mirren have just the wee buddies are very proud that St Mirren are just establishing a women's team. So that bodes really well. And you know we've got a fantastic woman, Hal Usta, at SFA as the diversity officer as well. So women in Scotland in football, one to watch.
Brilliant.
Tell us a bit about your new project, which is Session 2018. What's the concept behind that one?
So yourself, I was just going to say, because yourself and McLaughlin are kind of working together,
yes.
I believe.
Yeah.
So tell us about it. Very exciting, but I don't know enough about it. Then tell us what's...
Well, we'd love you to be part of it, Suzann, and we'd really love you to be part of it and to join thousands of girls and women and those that identify as women and girls in the 21st century on a procession. So obviously it's 100 years from the People's Representation Act and the first women getting the vote. And I think what we forget is that it was 68 years of a suffrage movement to achieve that. It wasn't just a moment in time. So what we're doing, there's 4 processions on the 10th of June, one in Edinburgh. Sign up via processions2018.com.co.uk, and basically it will be that procession, the one in Edinburgh, London, Cardiff and Belfast, will be a living portrait of women and girls in the 21st century, honouring the marches
those who came
of those who came before. But we live in such a kind of fluid, liquid times that we can't take equalities for granted. So walking our talk, being visible and creating beautiful banners like the artworks that the suffragettes created, they were beautiful and having a chance. What do we want to say? What do we want to express? Our hopes and our dreams and our concerns about women and girls. That's me holding up a banner. And we're encouraging women and girls to make banners. There's kits on the procession's website. Come along with those in the day and be part of this real moment in time.
Fantastic. It's a conjunction. It's the Women's Library, which is a fantastic resource. If anybody hasn't been, I urge you to go. It sounds like something they'll be right in the middle of. They are certainly worth going. They constantly have access to the banners and the suffragettes archives of Scotland, and it sounds very much like something that's going to be
that's
hand in
right.
hand.
So there's 100 marking the centenary There's 100 artworks made by women across the UK with communities, women artists. 18 of those are being made in Scotland, and the rest have been made in other home nations. And the 18 in Scotland, you're absolutely right, include the Women's Libraries. They were making their banners yesterday. I'm really proud to say that one of the commissions is with the Tannahill Centre in Fergusley Park, where I grew up. Project Ability, Scottish Refugee Council and Lanter. We have 18 commissions across Scotland, but encouraging people, women and girls, to be making creative and making their own banners. And I want to, I don't want to exclude the men around the table.
What happened without them?
One of the most beautiful banners that I saw recently was in the People's Palace, and it was the Northern Men's Movement for supporting women's suffrage in Glasgow. It's a beautiful banner, and absolutely men and boys are encouraged to make banners and come along and hold our handbags on the day when we're all processing.
Yes, we talk about this quite often on here as well, is that we talk about every week. I bring up usually regular views. I know there's always a sort of feminist or a feminist angle, and I look forward to the day when I don't have to, but unless we take men with us and male allies join in. So absolutely fantastic. I'm sure we'll come back to that in a wee bit, but for the meantime we're going to move on now for a bit of music. So we've got the fabulous Charly Houston, who's going to sing Stuck for us. Take it away, Charly.
You look exactly like your mother. She was young, not quite like your father. There's still time. Your brother and your sisters are growing up, but you're stuck. You're stuck looking for a way out, high above, but you are stuck. You are stuck looking for a way out, high above, but you're stuck. You are stuck here. Oh, you want to have a daughter or a son, to see them grow up. Future in the northern lights, but they might go out. They'll go out looking for a way out, high above, but you are stuck. You are stuck looking for a way out, high above, but you are stuck. You are stuck here. Go girl, get out of town, girl, go, go girl. Get out of town, girl, go, go girl. Go girl, get out of town, girl, go, go girl. Get out of town, girl, go, go girl. Get out of town, girl. Ooh.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely lovely.
Here we have a film about Procession 2018, so we'll show that just in a minute. But before we do, Jean, people who want to get involved in this, what do they do? First of all, how do they get involved? Is it simply by doing a banner? And if they wanted to get involved in other ways or in that way, who do they contact?
Well, the most important thing is about really creating that living portrait by being part of the procession on the 10th of June. Mm-hmm. The more women and girls that take part of that, the more chance we've got to be saying how rich and diverse the women and girls in our country are. So we would encourage people to register on processions.co.uk, tell us you're coming, and if you'd like to bring an existing banner or make a banner, it can take anything from 30 minutes to 8 hours. There's toolkits on the website, but the important thing is to register, vote with your feet. Come along on the 10th of June and be in that tradition of the women that went before us.
Okay, well, let's watch the film, which I hope is ready now. So, let's see it.
Banners as artworks have a very, very long tradition. They're a way of saying publicly what you feel on the inside.
The banner generally is there to encapsulate a group of people, and it's there to show what that group of people are fighting for or believing in.
If you look at the suffragettes, I think we've learnt a lot from them in the way we mobilise women, and that's our starting point in terms of fighting for equality. They had an incredible feel for the visual. They had their colours, there was the green and the purple and the white. They were geniuses at advertising and marketing, basically.
There was this wonderful artist called Mary Lowndes, who was a suffragette, and she wrote a little pamphlet on how to make a good banner, and it says at the end, "Let us go then and make banners and let them be beautiful." We're looking at ideas of what it means to be a 21st century woman today and creating a whole community project that spans right across the UK, with women being encouraged to make banners.
There will be processions on the streets in London, Edinburgh, Cardiff and Belfast on June the 10th. And it will be a joyous moment where all women can join in to mark this historic moment of a century of women having the vote in this country.
We're commissioning 100 artists to work with 100 organisations.
It's a really important year to celebrate women's involvement in civic and political participation, and we want to make sure that Muslim women also have their voices heard as part of the national discussions.
It's part of Sparkle's aim to include trans people in wider society as just regular people, and by being a part of the Processions project, we are kind of fulfilling that obligation as just being another group of women.
I believe that doing crafts within a support group setting is often very therapeutic. It's about all women coming together on a commonality and being able to raise their voices.
We are very, very excited about the project that we're participating in. We wanted to mark out the significance of Holloway Prison in suffragette history. More than 1,000 suffragettes were imprisoned there during the struggle for the vote.
I'm working with female inmates in the prison, and I think they'll be gaining confidence in their skills and their expression, and the confidence they gain will be really important for their reinsertion afterwards.
There's a feeling of real camaraderie when people take over the streets and do something that is hugely enjoyable and at the same time has great meaning.
I hope that the impact of processions is a bit like those suffragette early rallies, that in some way all bring alive hopes, concerns, cares that women and girls have today.
There is still so much to do to achieve gender equality, and this project is part of that, both recognition of what has happened in the past, but an understanding of what's still to come.
an important film there and an important project, so I would urge all women and girls to get involved. So just go to processions.co.uk, have a wee look about it, talk amongst yourself. If you're in any organisations, girl guides, women's groups, start talking about it. So moving on quickly from that, we've been talking about football, talking about toxic masculinity, the importance of culture. I think as well, it does feel that this year is a bit of a tipping point, Jean. So with processions and women making their mark with the Me Too movement, without going too much into that, we've talked about it in this project, and women fighting back. An interesting thing in the news this week as well was, we talked a couple of weeks ago when the Ulster rape trials, when the men were found not guilty of rape and seemed to return, it seemed to be as if it was going to be business as usual, and women got together and they demonstrated, and they've been sacked. Obviously they're not guilty of rape, but they've been sacked for misogyny. So interesting times that things are changing, and when women get together and do proceed and do protest, there's still work to be done. And we get, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it's a tipping point.
Mm-hmm.
But you can tell, you can only look back on these things and sort of get their importance in hindsight.
It shows the importance of women being seen and being visible and coming
Absolutely.
out, and this year has seen that.
And I think in terms of the, if you look at things like online petitions, those are actually really relatively recently. It was like 2006, 2007 that they were set up, and there is something wonderful across social media and that connectivity, but as well as clickivus, there is something really important, and I say this repeatedly to our young people about walking your talk, and as well, it's really incredible times in terms of those social media revolutionary platforms, but actually taking to the street and saying this is what matters to us, because you know, still having the gender pay gap being discussed when we're next month 50 years from the women in Dagenham in the Ford factory fighting for women's rights. Can I take it for granted?
Also as well, I think it's important talking about that space, and we talked to Sarah Sheridan about it a few weeks ago as well, is that I think it's sort of, and I use to say male masculinity, patriarchy as a whole rather than individual men, but this space of social media, it's a lot of women who have been kept at home and are at home with young children, they've been able to walk their walk, but online in public and in space, and they've been able to reclaim that space, and it's why the Me Too movement, for example, has been so powerful, as women who are at home alone or even frightened have been able to see their space, and it's been able to come forward, and then women taking to the streets. And
I think that's a great point about social media, because I think that, I mean, lots of us had a very, very positive experience, say, in the independence referendum on social media and generally, and subsequently, but we also then noticed, we noticed the dark sides of it. We noticed where there is like problem masculinities and problem voices on that. But I think too much of the debate, in terms of people problematise it, which is, there is that element, is there's an attempt by some voices to delegitimise social media, because social media has knocked down various walls and removed gatekeepers, and that is both wonderful on some level and then a challenge on us to be the best of humanity rather than falling to the worst of humanity. And I do think it behoves all of us to try and at points call out people who are hate mongers on these, because there is something wonderfully enlightening going on here, and you know, you've touched on a number of areas where people have been silenced before or haven't had voice, have really, you know, things have shifted, and I think there's lots of examples of Scotland. I mean, even things like what happened with the Rangers controversy that were massively aided by social media that mainstream media wouldn't have touched.
Absolutely, it's very much so. So you've got quite an exciting, interesting project coming up, Gerry?
Well, yes, I've been running a series. There's been a lot of controversies this year about culture, Creative Scotland and their financial decisions, and there's the impending, we're awaiting the Scottish Government's cultural strategy, draft report of that coming out I think at the end of May, and so I've been running an alternative series on kind of cultural conversations. Did an event a couple of weeks ago in Dundee with James Robertson and Kapka Kasabova, and on April 28th at the wonderful Govan Hill Baths on Glasgow's south side, which is like what an amazing,
that's a fantastic space,
amazing story and resource and space. And so that's Saturday at 11 o'clock. People just can come along.
Saturday, when? Saturday, what's the date?
Saturday, April 28th.
Well, let's just.
How about this Saturday come?
Yeah. No, I know. I'm not. That's the Junior Cup semis. Second leg.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. And so we've got talking about culture in an age of kind of noise and rage, because when mainstream media and platforms for how we sort of understand culture are retreating, like, take examples, the Herald and the Scotsman Theatre reviewers would just be an example. How do we disseminate and reproduce and nurture culture? So we've got a range of speakers there and people performing, Jude Barber, Joyce McMillan, Harry Giles, and others, Andrew Tickell, and that there'll be follow-on events from that about on June the 2nd in Edinburgh on the culture and constraining times, about from finances which are big challenges to people, to Brexit. So April 28th is next one, 2 weeks' time.
And what time is it again, Jerry?
11 a.m.
And can people buy tickets in advance?
Yeah,
Is it a cost to come in?
There's a cost if you book via Eventbrite. You can just go to the Imagination Scotland's Festival of Ideas website. You can book through that, and that is solely, there's a notional charge there just because of, if we allow it free with Eventbrite, people don't turn up.
Exactly, and then it looks like it's full up.
Or it's just come along on the day. It'll be the space is there.
It sounds really interesting.
Okay, I guess we can't finish the programme today without talking about Syria and the armed strikes unleashed over the weekend.
There was no Syria to talk about, well, not Syria itself, but the monstrosities and atrocities.
Indeed. I suppose, how did you feel, Jean, when you woke up to find out that those strikes had taken place? Just as an emotional reaction to it.
Well, it's just unbelievable. I think actually this decision was taken in such a overnight, quiet way, without the consultation. Definitely very sad.
What does it say about Parliament? Do you think that this can happen again? Because it happened. Tony Blair in Iraq, clearly the shadow of Iraq. There were.
Taking back control is a sham. Well, we know that. British armed forces have been in armed conflict every year since 1945, apart from 1 year, 1968. This is, I'm not trying to sound simplistic about the world, because the world is massively complex, but Britain's state is a war state. The British state was not created to look after us. It was created to run an empire and do things. That makes it sound very simple. But that genesis, 40 odd years after empire, is still at the core. And it's getting worse. Since the Cold War, Britain and America, because of the lack of the constraint of the Soviet Union, which had its problems, have been going around acting as the world's policeman. And it's, look, who are the rogue states here? There's 9 states, including the UK, US and France, including them, who have supported this. We might be the rogue states.
The argument is, I suppose, that you have to do something. You can't have a regime which uses chemical weapons, so people have to do something. So what else, if not this, what else can you do?
No, I think that's absolutely true. But the point has, this is a dread set of words, but this is virtue signalling. This is not doing any good. There's no strategy, there's no plan, there's no exit point. So just the need to do something, which we have done many times, is not the answer. I admit there then is a responsibility to do something that is beyond just talking, as Jeremy Corbyn says. But I find there is some of the people, like say Jeremy Corbyn, there's a sense of weariness about this, because we've been through this sort of, like, how many times over the last 20 years?
But it's the hideousness of the lack of humanity on the other side, so we'll bomb your country, but don't dare come to our shores with your children and look for support and help and shelter. So it's the total lack of humanity. There's no plan, there's no, it's just, and I couldn't agree with you more. I hate that term, but it is virtue signaling, and it's these powerful, talk back to toxic masculinity, but it feels, in Trump in particular, and this march to the right, and this, and quite literally a little boy playing with these big toys and having a hard on for war, to not put too fine a point on it, and being backed up by the British state. It's and we've been here before. For me, it was a guttural. I actually sat there and read this quite a popular person on Twitter, Katie Khaleesi, and she's brilliant, and I can't repeat what she said, but I echo the sentiments. It's like, I just want to scream for independence now. I want to get away from this, from a minority government that can pull us into another war, bombs on people without even due diligence or even attempting to find evidence.
But is there, I was worried about Trump's reaction initially when he was talking about missiles telling Russia the missiles are coming to you. Then it was almost as if it was a game when he said, well, I didn't say when the missiles were coming, I just said they would be coming. They might be coming soon, they might be coming not so soon. And then it was fairly soon he would take a decision, and then he did it. And it didn't strike me as being the actions of a rational leader.
You know, I mean, do you know, what was your reaction, Richard? You know, the question, how did it make you feel? I mean, you're a hard-nosed editor. You've seen this time and again. You covered.
I think the problem for me was it had echoes of Iraq in that nobody at that time was saying that the Saddam Hussein regime was anything other than reprehensible. And I don't think anybody here is saying that the Assad regime is anything other than reprehensible. The problem is, what do you do about that, and what do you do to make actually a difference, and will these bombs make any difference at all? And they argue that the first strike had very few casualties, but it opened the door for other strikes, and you can know what the casualties of those strikes will be. And we become inured to it, and become acceptable. It becomes acceptable that you can use bombs just on a whim without asking the Parliament of Britain whether you can do it.
But do we have a right? I mean, just an emotional reaction here, as Jane said. Police, do we have a right to jump into everything, you know, without being asked by the people? No matter how hideous the regime, do we have a responsibility? Do we have a right? Should we even be doing it? These are questions.
These are huge questions.
Huge questions. If they've been asked.
There is an argument about intervening in countries sometimes, which is that we have a problem because of Iraq, and we acknowledge that, but we have a problem with Iraq. There is a case sometimes for military intervention in the world if it's done with due process. The example I always use is that the Vietnamese communist government invaded Cambodia in 1979 and overthrew the murderous regime of Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge, who had killed 1.5 million people. That is an act of humanitarian intervention, and the world's a better place for it. So but the Blairites and the warmongers have destroyed the case for humanitarian intervention. And I sat up on Friday night because I'm a bit of a night owl, and up pops on Twitter, Trump was due to speak in half an hour. So I watched that, and apart from the fact, you know, Richard's alluded to this, his thought processes, etc. He's not a convincing orator. He's reading words that are clearly not his, and yet he's also trying to go through stages of trying to talk to Iran and Russia while launching what is, you know, some people try to call this a multilateral action. It's a unilateral action by 3 countries, and then Theresa May pops up after him, justifying and trying to cite international law for this action, while ignoring international law. We are in real danger. We have a command and control, a commander-in-chief structure in America that is broken, clearly, and we and the French have tied our fortunes to that. And I think it's like there's what comes after Trump is a question, and there's what comes after this action, because this is potentially not the end.
Well, of course not. And the word, you know, oft used at the time was Blair being lapdog to the US at the time. And it feels, you know, why is this happening all over again? You know, why are they following the exact same path? It doesn't. And you think, is anyone even in the cabinet of the government even sat down the way the 4 of us are here today and going, what the heck? Why would you do this? What's the humanitarian end? What's the causes? What's the evidence? What's the strategy? Where are we going in the future?
Because the one thing we learned from Iraq, I mean, there was many things we should have learned from Iraq, but the one thing that we definitely should have learned is the danger of acting when you have no idea of the consequences of your actions, and you have no idea how you're going to get out the situation that you caused. And I think the same thing is happening here, and we don't know yet how this is going to affect Russia and Russia's. Well, we know how it will affect Russia's relationships with the West, but we don't know how badly they will take the news.
And taking us back to the time of Iraq, even certainly in the very beginning, there were certainly some people gave benefit of the doubt to what was happening there, because there was certain people and very decent and intelligent politicians and who turned around and said, well, we don't know what Blair knows yet, let's wait and see, let's look at the evidence. So there was people so there was a certain amount of benefit of the doubt, and thought that actually evidence was being gathered and there was intelligence being listened to, whereas in this case it just seems to be a wee bit like, let's just go in with our great big...
I've heard the argument we made here as well, that we don't know what these world leaders have got on their desk, and but looking back, we now know that there was nothing on Tony Blair's desk that we have not now seen.
Well, you know this, you asked him personally,
I asked him once about whether we had seen everything that was on his desk, and he said, yeah, we have. And for me, even knowing everything that I knew then, there still wasn't a convincing case for what.
And Iraq changed everything. The breach of trust there, and in the lack of contrition by people like Blair, Alistair Campbell, and so on. And it's a way, I think there's even similar to like Brexit, horrible as it is, there's no way back from Brexit. And I heard Chuka Ummah this morning saying, we've got to stop having British foreign policy defined by Iraq. That Iraq, I don't know how we get away from that Iraq syndrome, really, in a way, because they haven't shown contrition and apologised.
So says a New Labour man.
Yeah, and all sorts of people around the world. I mean, I was reading an Indian writer this week, and he has a chapter in a book called "Is There a Future for the West?" Which the answer is no. And he's got a chapter titled "The West's Suicidal Wars," and he said the West's sequential suicidal wars are one factor in basically the West is decline of the West. It is doing it to itself.
You talked earlier on though, about a world's policeman, but doesn't the world need a policeman? It might not be the policeman it's got, but doesn't the world need a policeman?
Well, it certainly doesn't need a Chief Constable Trump from Compton, does it? You know,
but it does.
To have
it needs to have surely it needs to have some organisation and some platform which can deal effectively with international disputes, which the United Nations has signally failed to do.
Totally. And we do have a problem with Putin's Russia, and there are problems in parts of, say, the British left, and I guess lefts everywhere, about not understanding and recognising. I mean, Putin has illegally occupied Crimea, there's the eastern Ukraine, there's the invasions of Georgia, and all sorts of other things. And then we've got the influence of dodgy Russian money, which runs from the City of London property market to bankrolling parts of the Tory party. So there's lots of things we have to stand up to, and that's about, I guess, a horrible form of capitalism and how it affects the international order. But those are not easy to solve.
United Nations, though, there are all sorts of international disputes which have arisen and which the United Nations has failed to deal with adequately. At some point, shouldn't somebody be saying, what's the United Nations for? And if it's not working properly, how can we make it work better?
Well, there's also times where they have very clearly said that they think things are wrong and and they're just ignored.
Or they're vetoed by one or other of the powers that are able, So it seems, I don't know, it seems to me that there's a real urgent need to take some action in that, because countries are always going to fall out. There's always going to be disputes, there's always going to be disagreements, there's always going to be some person doing something that the rest of us find reprehensible, but there's no possible court or organisation to sort those things out.
We can't let the bullies run the school,
This week I watched the Netflix film on the Obamas last year, and I was so mightily impressed by Samantha Power, who had been his ambassador to the UN. Fascinating woman who really had this ability to be down in the street with mothers who'd lost their daughters to Boko Haram, who was taking to task at every opportunity fellow diplomats from the UN and saying, if you do one thing for me, this is the thing I want you to do. And you saw those individuals, or individuals like her, really fighting for space within this kind of diplomatic session. So I think it's there is a real sense of urgency in terms of reassessing what the values or the kind of criteria as it feels very lost. If fantastic.
There's definitely some people in the United Nations who are doing brilliant work every single day, but maybe the whole overall structure.
I think maybe if you have an organisation which has got the veto system in, it does rather hinder it.
It's also based on, we've got 5 permanent members of the Security Council who are the victors of the Second World War. That was 1945. There's this whole great thing about Britain's a member of the one of the 5 permanent 5. That is a kind of remnant of history. Us and France being there, the great new powers of the world like India and lots of Brazil are not there. And I think there's a way in which the United Nations are clearly broken. But it's like how do we find international consensus? That Trump, it's what happens after Trump, because part of Trump is an expression of profound dark forces going on in America and the rise of American isolationism, which there's a long lineage of America first before the Second World War. The fact that America didn't support the League of Nations America first was in the Second World War, and then they didn't support the League of Nations after the First World War, thus completely hindering the international order. And there is a pullback to that in America, of saying the world's too complex, just look after ourselves, despite what Trump's done this weekend.
But to take it back down to a more local as well, as anyone who's ever run a team collaborative working isn't that easy.
Absolutely, that's absolutely true. So, anyway, Thank you
If
very much.
only we could solve Syria.
Indeed we could.
Yeah.
We shall no doubt return to this in other
In
programmes.
absolute detail. So we're just to take us out of the programme, we're going to return to Charly wonderfully, and this time she's going to be singing Desire for us.
I was not looking when I found you, when I found you. You were not speaking when I saw you, when I saw you. And I guess I understood. I guess I understood. You started a fire, kickstart desire. You started my fire, you started a fire, you started my fire, kickstart desire. Started my fire. Ooh, yeah. Ooh, baby, you started. Now I'm not saying it's a bad thing. You're the best thing. Can't explain these feelings, can't explain. You are so special, and I guess I understand. I guess I understand. You started a fire, you started a fire, kickstart desire. You started my fire, you started a fire, you started a fire, kickstart desire. Started my fire. Ooh, ooh, yeah. Baby, you started. You started a fire. You started a fire. Kickstart desire. You started my fire. Kickstart desire. You started my fire, baby. You started. You started a fire. You started a fire. Kickstart desire. Well, you started my fire.
Thank you very much.